Hi, I'm Victoria Cadal, and I chose the country Ireland for this project, with the topic of the effect from the Tudor Conquest. Ireland is just 375 miles from England, making it one of the frontiers of Europe. At the time of the 16th century, Queen Elizabeth named Ireland to be a land on the edge filled with barbarians. In the long run of things, the Queen wanted control over Ireland and seeked out a leader for the job. Ireland was built from hunter and gatherers, then into farmers, housing the first of oats and barley crops and the potato, which I will talk about later on. I chose Ireland because it's part of who I am and a part of my heritage. As being half Filipino, I know much of my dad's side, although I haven't really dove into what makes up my English side, as it groups in about 8 or more countries into one broad genre. Another reason is that I'm choosing a place to study abroad and have always wondered about traveling to Ireland. Here's some history of the food culture of Ireland. Potatoes are their main source of nutrition for many years, the biggest being champ, which is a meal, and a mixture of milk, butter, salt, potatoes, and stinging needles. Potatoes were easy to grow and manage for the common man. It became the base of most meals, no matter what social class you held. Ireland treated their cattle differently from the rest of the world, as it took them a while, if ever, to kill their livestock and cattle, since they were mostly using them for milk, cheese, and butter. Next is geography and climate of Ireland, mostly containing of flat, low-lying areas that were ringed by mountains made it easy to keep crops moist during the dry heats, as it would melt the ice from the glaciers and bring them down to the crops and surrounding vegetation, which made their forests very live and tall. Although during the Tudor Conquest the excavation of the forests took place, leaving Ireland with only 1% of land covered in forests. The climate and weather for Ireland was filled with humid and dry waves of wind, as it sits upon high rocks, receiving dry coastal winds. Ireland also faces a healthy amount of rainfall, making it less of a chore for our farmers to water their potatoes. For healthy potatoes to grow, they need 2 inches of water per week. Now let's talk about what food the English brought to Ireland during the Tudor Conquest. As for all classes, the Tudor mostly consumed onions, cabbage, and bread. The English had bread with every meal, no matter what social class you held. But the food that made the biggest impact was the cabbage. We'll get more into this information later on. The richer Englishman was able to enjoy many herbs like parsley, mint, rosemary, thyme, and sage. For the English, bread was important, and it showcased your political and societal class by the color and ingredients of bread that you consumed. For the poor man, they consumed carter's bread, which was made out of rye and wheat, which is the top picture, the darker bread. For the middle class man, they consumed yeoman's bread, which is made out of wholemeal, which is a lighter brown, and it's in the middle picture. And the rich Englishman consumed manchet bread, which is made out of white wheat flour, where most of the world's white bread comes from. Next, I wanted to focus in a little bit of a background of what the Tudor Conquest was and what took place during this conquest. During this conquest, it took place in the 16th century under the influence of the Kingdom of England and Queen Elizabeth. As they wanted control over Ireland, they sought for a leader to rally the troops. The English chose Shane O'Neill as he was becoming the Irish warlord and took the leader position of taking over the English commanding officers and their resources. This war between the Irish and the Tudors lasted from 1485 to 1603. Before the conquest, Ireland was built off of many clans, but the most important were the Gaelic warriors from the MacDonalds and the O'Neills. I just want to clarify that it's MacDonald's and not McDonald's, but I just thought that was a funny thing to share. During the Tudor Conquest, Shane O'Neill became very and his ego became very big. He began straining the resources from both ends, from the English commanders and from his resources from his homeland. Spain saw to this very quickly and rallied their troops to Ireland in the fight to gain their own independence over Ireland. And Shane O'Neill became defenseless and sought to his fellow Gaelic warriors and the MacDonalds for help. The reason why this was so contradictory for O'Neill to go to the MacDonalds was because earlier in the conquest, they had a little bit of an argument of who should run Ireland. In the meantime, Shane O'Neill believed he was saved, but just like the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones, a fight broke out between the Gaelic warriors and chopped him and his commanding officers into bits. Then they presented his head to Sir Henry Sidney and proved to England that they had failed in trying to take over their independence, while also showcasing that they chose the wrong leader to take over their independence. The next thing I wanted to mention was the Great O'Neill, which was and became a household name known to many people living in Ireland as either an enemy to Ireland or an act of restoration. With the Gaelic and the MacDonalds running the so-called Office of Ireland, a new O'Neill was learning the craft of becoming a leader and a warrior from the watchful eyes of the English. The English decided to take the brother of Shane O'Neill's son, Hugh O'Neill, and craft him into the perfect puppet ruler to further exploit Ireland. Although in reality, they just created a stronger and smarter leader for the Irish to come into victory of independence, as Hugh O'Neill quickly turned around and took Ireland as his own and regaining Irish to their independence. Next, I wanted to briefly mention the differences between the Tudor and the Irish for their beer and wine. For the Tudor, the common man, ale became the staple beverage, as wine was shared amongst the richer man, and it had mostly come from England and France. For Ireland, spiced ale wasn't as popular, and the most popular was the Metheglin, made from fermented honey and mead. For the Irish, wine wasn't as common, and it wasn't as enjoyed. For the end result of the food culture in Ireland, the potato is still the staple food, and even before and after the Tudor Conquest, it remains the main nutritional base. This time it's just added with a bit more herbs. The potato, or the Irish potato, is in the most common dish till this day, the coal cannon. This dish is mixed with lots of salt and butter, milk, cheese, potatoes, vegetables of your choice, and cabbage. And as we talked about before, cabbage is one of the vegetables that the Tudor or the English brought over during the conquest. This meal has become one of the most staple foods for Ireland. Now, before the Tudor Conquest, the Irish had another meal, champ, which I've talked about earlier, which was almost the same dish as colcannon, but without the cabbage. Pictured in the top right corner is the colcannon, and in the left bottom corner is the champ. Oftentimes, these two dishes get mixed up, but when someone does mix this up, it leads into a harsh argument about the Tudor Conquest and the victory and independence of Ireland. Here are my resources, and thank you. I really enjoyed this project.